My name is John Bolingo Tahira, the Executive Director of Hope for Children and Women Victims of Violence, also a member of RELON, Refugee-led network.
Good morning once again. My name is Belanshi Miriman. I'm the co-founder of Miracle Network and a member of RELON.
Good morning, gentlemen and ladies. I'm called Mkendo Mbokanijeri. I am the Executive Director of One Open Heart Initiative, and I'm the Project Manager of RELON COVID Response Project. I would say that it's quite interesting seeing how we've spent an entire year without children going to school. And this has actually affected mostly the refugee learners and those children that are from low income background in Uganda. So looking at the massive shift from mutual learning to online learning, and this basically goes with those children that are able to get access to some of these facilities, because for you to learn online, you need a number of things. You need a presence of a computer, a presence of internet, and other things which most refugee children, and those that are coming from low background don't have access to. So this has really affected, their entire learning. And it is really, I think, very important for us as leaders to really think critically what could be done and make sure that probably there is a solution to this. And here I'm not only talking about refugees, but I'm also talking about those Ugandan children that are coming from low-income background, to see how basically platform could be created to make sure that their learning aren't really affected and they continue with their learning. And to me, I do think that it's really time for people to think to live with COVID, because COVID is there and is going nowhere. So will, because of this, children not be able to develop intellectually, simply because this is really a threat to all of us. But again, I really think that life has to move on, and I think this is a time for us to start thinking about this and think of how critical this could be done.
Yeah, I think when you look at this is a really serious war. It's like we are fighting with the enemy we can't see. Because now you find that most of the refugee children, it's really very, very hard for them to access this e-learning. Because someone is struggling to get even lunch, how can he have access to the computer? How can he have access to internet? This is very, very, very dangerous. And we all know that for children who are born in poor families, in order to break the poverty cycle, it's only the education way. Now, if they can't access education, there is no hope. And when you come to COVID-19, of course, this you have to know that you are going to live with it. And and who knows, maybe even there can come another serious disease, which is more than COVID-19. So I think now as leaders, this is a tough time to see how we can really be engaged and see how our refugee children and even the Ugandan children who are in the poor families can have access to education regardless of any cost. Thank you.
I was looking on this, I can say it is a cheaper way whereby we find that these low-income families can access education, distance education learning. For instance, for those poor income families who have TV, during COVID, when we broke out in March, April, we used to have this e-learning program on TV, whereby as parents who have children could access that e-learning. But that was a big challenge if I'm to look at it, for instance, for refugees or maybe nationals. No, let me talk on the refugee side. Like for parents who were not born here, this is a new curriculum whereby I found that as parents, you cannot understand what is being taught to the TV, whereby we need someone to come and coach the children. This I way back I tried to discuss with some of the parents. They were like, yes, that is nice. It is a nice program, though as parents we are not like we don't have that, we don't know that curriculum whereby we can help our children. This have been something whereby it is a bit like challenging parents, whereby you find that as a parent you need to look for someone to come and coach your children, which is a bit expensive. Not only like for people who can afford to buy internet or who have like laptop, but for those at least who can afford the TV to follow up those teachings. But they have another challenge of having coaching people who come to coach their children. Then they were like, we don't have money to pay them. So as a leader, this is something that we can think, what can we do? Because COVID is not ending. So this is something that we need to acknowledge and live with it, but we have to put some measures. How can we support these children so that they can access to better education? Because education is a weapon to use so that we can eradicate the poverty. So since we don't have that education, what is the future of our children? Yes, that is my perspective on that.
And I think the government of Uganda is trying to push also, for using TV and radio,
Yes.
to promote education, which is really quite challenging, as you saying, because at the end of the day, the children, they need at least somebody who could elaborate more on what is taught, either through radio or through TV. So the other thing that I've noticed, children are being affected in a very negative way, where we are having now a number of young girls who are getting pregnant at a very tender age. And some of them actually who were closer, maybe to 17, since they have missed last year, some of them are already thinking that they should not go back to school again because they feel like they have grown up and now they want them to repeat the other year, probably that they have expected to pass. Now they want them to repeat the same year. So it is really affecting them in a very negative way. And I really do think that there should be something that should be done, to overcome this.
Regarding to that, to the teenager pregnancy, also we are going to have a serious child labor because now if you have to look at the children now, they are no longer interested to go back to school. Most of them, because they are coming from the poor families, they are now putting the interest on how they can get money so that they can survive at daily basis. That is also another challenge that I've realized that we don't know how we're going to tackle it, but this is a serious challenge whereby we have to look at it. Yes.
Yeah, I think we can also thank the government of Uganda. It has really done a lot trying to see that education is being done on the radio and TVs, but also when you do the assessment, you find that this teaching really helps show people, especially those who can afford to pay teachers to come and coach children. Otherwise, those one who can't really have that money to pay people who come and coach their children, you find that TV alone and the radio really doesn't help much. First of all, this is the problem which came abruptly, whereby even these teachers don't have the skill how to teach on TV, and the child is able to do what to capture what you're teaching. You get it? They were not trained. Even these children also they are not trained. How can I capture the teachings taking on the radio, on TV? So this is even a big challenge, whereby we need to see how we can try to bring up trainings. If I'm teaching on TV, how can I be assured that the child who is in the sitting room is recapturing what I'm saying? So I find this is also another challenge.
Remember, it's not long ago, Uganda shifted from analog to digital. And when we talk about analog, I mean digital media here, we mean that people, even households, to access channels, there's some monthly subscription fee that they need to pay, which in some sense also affects even this very good initiative that the government came up with, because they did not think about probably giving back people access TV for free of charge. So those still that are coming from low income background, again, this looks more to be more expensive to them simply because they need again to pay for monthly subscription for a TV. And there are a number of households by the way without TV.
Yeah.
So it's also really a challenge their intellectual development.
There is also another, I can say, another way of education that they are put in place, whereby we found that schools, they are providing some notes, and children, they always remind them to go and bring them back to home so that they can revise. But on top of that, they're supposed to pay some allowance to access to those notes, which has been also another challenge to parents. Imagine if you're having 4 children who are supposed to go and pick notes after 2 weeks. That is 80,000. So imagine now, when you have a low income at a daily basis, you think that you're going to continue buying those notes for children when you don't know when yet they're going back to school. That also it is another challenge. Yes, schools have been supporting, but you have to look at maybe at the percentage, how many children are able to purchase those notes. Because one handout is 20,000, which is a bit expensive.
Yeah, it's really challenging. You need to come out with a solution as soon as possible. Otherwise, it's really going to be tricky because, especially for these young children, this one who are in primary one, you get it. No one someone starts education, takes the career, even lose interest. It's going to be a challenge.
There are quite challenges that as refugees from low income, they're facing, yet they went to TV learning, online learning, like those who have internet, purchasing notes, handouts to school, from school to their homes. Those are kind of education system that the government have put on place. But I've said that those system, though they are there, but refugee children from low income status, they are facing challenges, which is first of all, they don't have the TVs, they cannot afford to buy data to be online so that they can access their learning, as well as to get that money to go and purchase notes. It is a bit difficult. So to me, I think that those systems were good, but I'm not saying that they are tending to be quality education. I can say that it can be poor education when you have to look at the income that urban refugees they have, the income status for refugees. There are some who can afford, but not at the same way as those who have money. And at the end of the day, we will realize that a few percentage of refugee children are accessing to those online.
A few things I would say is that maybe this would really be the time to me that the government would also look at this YouTube, the Universal Primary Education Program. Maybe this would be the time that the government would look at this and try to modernize this system, as they did a great job, to protect this country from the number spread of COVID-19, whereby people were kept home. And then a mass fundraising was done to distribute food to a number of households, right? Which has kept a number of, Ugandan community to stay safe home while having enough food to eat. In the same way, there could really be probably a mass fundraising driven by the government to equip these schools and at least have these teachers, present, like teaching, and then children can access this online, whereby maybe could be to provide each home probably one computer. And probably a router. It is expensive, but to me, I think is doable. Is doable if there is will to do that. So to make sure that if we are avoiding mass gathering, which is a reality today, which none of us can contradict, because this is the easier way for somebody to contract COVID-19, this virus. So if we are advised not to gather, then there should be, in the same line, we should think of how do we make sure that learning is a continuous process. Because imagine a country with probably more than 60% of illiterate. Which country is that? And what is the future for that country? Because when we look at the modern, the Western world, yes, they are also avoiding mass gathering, but in reality, education is continuing. We have international school here within this country. You look at those children who attend to those schools, education is continuing for these children. For them, they are not interrupted in any way. They have made sure that they avoid gathering, but children are getting access to all learning materials in a timely manner, right? In a timely manner, they are getting access to these learning resources, and they are continuing with their education. So I think this is something that also the Ugandan government should put at heart and probably think of how that could be implemented. I know if there is way this is actually doable.
I think it's really doable because now I think the government should now impose distance learning. And I think with partners, there are tablets which are not expensive, whereby the government can distribute to the poor families so that children can also access. And even I think even if children can go back to school, we need to make sure that we are prepared. Remember, COVID-19 came when no one was really knowing what's happening, you see? But now we need to say, okay, maybe we've got the vaccine, people can maybe gather, no problem, but we need also to think what happens if another disease like COVID-19 comes. So shouldn't even sleep, no. We need to see how can we make sure that education continues in case something more even worse than COVID-19 comes. So that's why now this is the time to sit and do a proper plan. Get it? To see how can our children be able to study while at home in case it happens. We start also looking for partners. Government should look for partners who can provide these materials at cheap cost. You know? I believe if you were to maybe purchase 5 million of tablets, the price can be reduced.
Yeah.
And these poor families can have access. And I think with that way, yeah, life can go on. Because there is no life without education.
Yeah.
And if the government cannot really put more energy on this, then we don't see the future. Yeah.
I think I really totally agree with what you're saying. You can look at, given the fact that computers are a bit expensive, tablet can actually do that work. An idea could be to provide either 2 or 1 per household, and then we make sure that there is this teacher who probably does it either through TV, right? Trying to explain what is being installed in the tablet. And then the rest of the hours of the day, children are able to go through their tab and follow the instruction that the teacher has given on TV. It's a way of trying to cope up with COVID-19. Otherwise, if education is to stop, that means we are trying to say that life should stop. Yet, life has to continue, much as, we are in a situation like this. I do think that refugee-led organizations are really doing what they can in their possession to make sure that there is continuity in learning. Though this is not more like, how do we call it, formal, kind of education, but the informal kind of teaching that are happening in a number of refugee-led organizations is actually helping a number of these refugees to continue with their learning. For instance, one youth one had, which is one of the refugee-led organization member, has introduced a learning program where children, or let me say, yes, children that are less than 18, so between 13 and 18, they are being taught a number of subjects such as business operations, IT, looking at HTML, JavaScript, and HTML, and CSS as well, and then mathematics, practical math, and then entrepreneurship. The idea is to make sure that the young children that are within this age bracket, they are able to acquire this knowledge, and probably after a year, because it's a 1-year program, after a year they are able to start their own business, and because life has to continue. So these lessons are being taught online using Zoom, where each of them, whether you can be at your home, or if you want, you can come at the center. Uh, but then, to make sure that we respect the social distance, we don't call all of them to come at the center. Few of them can come, those who don't have computers, to use the center computers, but while observing the social distancing. And I believe that a number of refugee groups are doing similar kind of work.
Yeah, I think this is really a tough time whereby refugee-led network, of course, you cannot sit and watch what's happening. And what we have to do is to advocate for our children. Because when you try to see our community, probably is the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because others, they can afford tablets, computers, they have TVs, But for our people, it's really very hard because they still survive how to get a meal. So they don't even have that I think that maybe I need to buy a tablet or a computer. So as refugee-led network, it's now our time to advocate for them, to look even for partners who can come in and support our children with these tools so that our children are not left behind.
And maybe on top of that, refugee-led organization, I really think is doing what it can, because under the COVID response program, refugee-led organization have been able to support some of these initiatives that some of the refugee-led organization are doing. For instance, UFA Foundation, which also has a learning program using online program. The refugee-led organization has given them some startup capital for them to be able to purchase more computer to make sure that this program is continuing. I really think that it's time, as Mr. Bolingo is saying, that all partners could come on board and do what they can to make sure that refugee children, and the Ugandan counterparts, those that come from low-income background, they also have access to education, because this is where their future lies. So if this one is compromised, that means the future generation will be in a very big trouble. Some of the proposed solutions have been already mentioned in our discussion. But yes, there is a lot that is still to be done to make sure that there is inclusivity. One is about partnering with some of different community initiatives that are already there, that probably are trying to promote education, to make sure that these facilities have enough resources and equipment for the initiative started to continue, because we don't know when will COVID stop. And then the other thing that we can look at is to look at some of these international schools. What are their social cooperation responsibilities? And probably try and advocate, make sure that each of them at least takes either one or two refugees, and two or one of from the host community, those who are from the low income background, to make sure that at least we are giving chance to these children that their parents cannot meet some of these costs, to make sure that education is continues, so that they can aspire to a greater and better future. So yeah, that's something that the other thing maybe that could also be done is to put more resources to some of these refugee initiatives that are already promoting education, to make sure that those initiatives don't die, but rather they continue.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jerry. I think it's time to join our efforts, and especially they always say that nothing for us without us. So as Refugee-led Education Network, we need really to make sure that we really advocate for our children. We need to make sure that we make contacts. As my brother said, we have international school around, so at least we can contact them. I believe they can help. There are other cooperation outside, even inside, which we can always, try to knock and make sure that the initiatives within refugees themselves are supported. So they can be able to do what? To reach to the people in the need. Because when I try to see how the response of refugee-led network was, I think if we do the same, then we can be really successful. Because remember, most of the international organization around, even in the strong local organization, no one was able to respond. You could see refugee-led organization network trying to move on bicycle, trying to go there and provide the food for refugees. But refugee-led organization initiatives were ready to do what? To help their people. So this also is a serious war, whereby we have to make sure that we knock there and see that our children have access to these tools.
Thank you, Mr. Bolingo and Jerry. You had good points whereby I was like, since refugee-led organization has been doing good work during COVID-19, then what about this education side? This is something that as RELON, we need to be included in the policymakers when it comes for education, because this is something that I think we are left behind, and this is something that we can try to advocate more, because without it, we are here because of the education. I do believe we're here because of education, so we need to tackle on that side of education to see that our voices are heard, because refugee communities being behind regarding of the education. So I think this is something that we are going to, after this session, we are going to work on it, and we see how best we can work with other international stakeholders as well as local stakeholders to see that refugee communities are being included in the decision making regarding to education. Because if we are to families going to access to those e-learning system, because we may find that these the parents who have their children to these international schools, they are well off regarding to the refugee families. So we have to make maybe our own research, and we find using their experience from these international schools to find out how best as RELON can support the refugee families.
Yes, to emphasize on what Bella is talking about, policymakers. It's very, very crucial that when we are making these policies, to make sure that the children from the low income are actually considered more than, because the other one are able to access any kind of system that are there, because for them their income is consistent. But for these ones that don't receive income, if they aren't prioritized, then it becomes challenging for them to fit in any kind of system that is there. And this is what we are seeing now. COVID ambushed everyone, where you find that you are forced to stay home, but then there are very many pressing issues that need to continue moving, such as education. And then you find that since there is shift from in-person learning to online, now there are this big number of children that are left behind simply because they are unable to to fit in this new system. So this new system is something that, whether COVID is there or not, it is something that should be considered, simply because we don't know what the future has for us. So something even much stronger than COVID might come up. But then again, people have to continue learning. So if we aren't thinking about this right now carefully and make sure that probably is incorporated in the annual curriculum of everyone, then that means we aren't providing any solution for these children that are from the low income background. So this is the time that this could be considered and be incorporated in the national curriculum, so that we make sure that in case there is a pandemic that arises again, learning continues, even though you are from the low income or a high income background. So and this is something that partners and humanitarian organization has to advocate for, including the refugee-led organization. So this is something that, whenever we are in those big forums, this is something that should be talked about to make sure that there is a solution to this in case we have again another pandemic that arises.